The glass dome of Station Zanera 7 stretched across the sky like a massive bubble, filled with stars that never stopped shining. Inside the station, thousands of aliens moved through the halls. Some walked on two legs, some on four, and some floated in the air without touching the ground at all. Their skin came in every color imaginable: blue, green, silver, even transparent like water. Doyen stood near a tall window, watching them all with quiet curiosity. He was a human, which made him rare here, very rare. Earth had only been invited to join the Galactic Coalition 3 months ago, and most aliens still didn't know what to make of humans. Some thought they were interesting. Others thought they were dangerous because humans felt things too strongly. He pressed his hand against the cool glass and smiled a little. Back home on Earth, he worked with animals that had been hurt or scared, dogs that had been beaten, horses that wouldn't let anyone touch them, birds with broken wings and broken trust. His mother had taught him how to speak to them without words, how to show them they were safe. She always said fear bites harder than teeth. "Doyen, stop daydreaming," Yuna called from across the room. She was the leader of their small group, the official diplomat from Earth. She wore a formal blue uniform, and her hair was pulled back tight. She looked nervous, which made Doyen nervous too. Yuna never looked nervous. "Sorry," Doyen said, walking over to join the others. There were only 5 humans total on this station, and right now all of them were getting ready for the biggest moment in Earth's history. Tonight was the opening ceremony. Tonight, Earth would officially become the 48th member of the Galactic Coalition. "Remember," Yuna said, looking at each of them seriously, "we're guests here. We smile, we bow, we don't touch anything unless they say we can. Earth is counting on us to make a good impression." Doyen nodded, but his attention drifted to the large doors at the end of the hall. He could hear something on the other side. A low rumbling sound, like distant thunder. And something else too. A soft whimpering that made his chest feel tight. "What's that noise?" he asked. One of the station guards, a tall being made of what looked like purple crystal, turned toward him. "The Vryn have brought their Shalkir. You'll see them soon enough, human. Best to keep your distance." Before Doyen could ask what a Shalkir was, the doors opened. Music filled the air, strange and beautiful, played on instruments Doyen had never seen before. Aliens began flowing into the grand hall, a room so enormous it could have held 10 football fields. The ceiling was covered in holographic stars that moved and danced. And then Doyen saw them. 3 massive creatures walked into the hall, and every alien nearby took a step back. They looked like wolves, but wrong. Too big. Too sharp. Each one stood 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with 6 glowing eyes arranged in 2 rows across their faces. Instead of fur, they had black scales that looked like polished stone. Their teeth were as long as Doyen's hand, and their claws scraped against the metal floor with every step. Around each creature's neck was a thick collar that sparked with blue electricity. The collars buzzed and clicked, and every time they did, the creatures flinched. Doyen felt sick. Behind the 3 creatures walked a tall alien with crystalline skin that reflected rainbow colors. This was Ambassador Kaelrin of the Vryn Empire, one of the most powerful members of the Coalition. The ambassador didn't look at the creatures, didn't speak to them, just walked ahead while they followed, heads low, bodies trembling. "Those are Shalkir," Yuna whispered to Doyen. "The Vryn use them as guards. Don't stare." But Doyen couldn't look away. He watched how the creatures moved, tense, ready to bolt or fight at any second. He saw how their eyes darted around the room, never focusing on anything for long. He noticed how they kept their distance from each other, even though they were clearly pack animals. They were terrified. The ceremony began. Speeches were made in dozens of languages, translated through devices that everyone wore in their ears. Doyen tried to pay attention, but he kept watching the Shalkir. One of them, the largest, had scars across its face and back. Old scars. The kind that came from years of hurt. Then, halfway through Ambassador Kaelrin's speech, something went wrong. There was a sharp crackling sound, like lightning striking metal. Sparks shot from the collars around the Shalkir's necks. The blue electricity flickered once, twice, then went dark. The collars stopped buzzing. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the largest Shalkir threw back its head and roared. The sound shook the walls. It was pain and rage and fear all mixed together into something that made Doyen's bones vibrate. The other two joined in, their voices creating a horrible chorus that sent every alien in the room running for the exits. Chaos exploded through the grand hall. Aliens screamed and pushed each other aside. Security guards shouted orders but didn't move forward. The three Shalkir spun in circles, snapping at the air, crashing into tables and sending food and decorations flying everywhere. "Run!" Yuna grabbed Doyen's arm and pulled him toward the side of the room. They dove behind an overturned table, along with a handful of other diplomats. Three aliens that looked like giant insects and one that seemed to be made of living smoke. The largest Shalkir stalked toward them, its 6 eyes fixed on their hiding spot. Its lips pulled back to show every one of those terrible teeth. Saliva dripped from its jaws. The creature's whole body shook, muscles bunched tight. "Ready to attack." "Nobody move," Yuna breathed. Her face was pale. But Doyen was already moving. He stood up slowly, hands empty and visible, and stepped out from behind the table. "Doyen, no!" Yuna reached for him but missed. The Shalkir's attention snapped to him immediately. All 6 eyes locked onto this small human who dared to approach. The creature lowered its head and growled, a sound that started deep in its chest and built into something that promised violence. Every instinct Doyen had screamed at him to run, but he'd learned long ago not to trust those instincts around scared animals. Scared animals didn't need someone to run from them. They needed someone to stay. He took another step forward, then another. The Shalkir's growl got louder. Its body coiled like a spring ready to snap. "Doyun, get back here!" Yuna's voice sounded far away. The creature lunged. It moved faster than something that size should be able to move, closing the distance between them in half a second. Jaws wide enough to bite Doyun in half opened right in front of his face, and Doyen dropped to one knee. He turned his head to the side, avoiding eye contact. He let his shoulders slump, making himself smaller. And he extended one hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. The Shalkir's jaws stopped inches from his head. Hot breath washed over him, smelling like metal and fear. The creature's whole body trembled, caught between the instinct to attack and the confusion of seeing something it had never seen before. Prey that didn't run, didn't fight, just waited quietly. "Easy," Doyen whispered, his voice soft and low. He kept his hand steady, even though his heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. "You're just scared, aren't you?" The grand hall had gone completely silent. Every eye in the room watched through doorways and from behind furniture. Even the other 2 Shalkir had stopped their rampage, watching their pack leader with heads tilted in confusion. The massive creature's growl faded into uncertainty. Its 6 eyes studied Doyen, trying to understand what this strange being was doing. And very slowly, Doyen began to speak again, words flowing like a gentle stream, showing the scared creature that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in this galaxy wanted to hurt it. Time seemed to stop. Doyen stayed on one knee with his hand extended, speaking in that same soft voice. The massive Shalkir stood frozen above him, close enough that he could see his reflection in its black scales. "I know you're scared," Doyen continued, keeping his words slow and gentle. "Everything's loud and bright and wrong, isn't it? And that thing around your neck hurt you. It hurt you for a long time." The creature's ears twitched. On Earth, Doyen had learned that animals always listened, even when they looked like they were about to attack, especially then. He noticed everything his mother had taught him to look for. The Shalkir's ears were pressed flat against its head, fear. Its pupils were huge and dark, overwhelmed. Its mouth was open not in a snarl but panting, panic. Even the way it stood, weight shifted back on its haunches ready to run. That wasn't aggression. That was a terrified animal that had been pushed too far. "You've never been petted, have you?" Doyen asked quietly. "Nobody ever told you that you're good. Nobody ever made you feel safe." Behind him, he heard Yuna whisper urgently to the others. Someone get security. Someone do something. But nobody moved. What could they do? The Shalkir was right there, and any sudden movement might set it off. Slowly, carefully, Doyen reached up toward the collar still wrapped around the creature's neck. The collar had stopped shocking, but it was still there, still tight, probably still painful. The Shalkir watched his hand move. Its body tensed. "I'm going to help you," Doyen said. "This is going to feel better, I promise." His fingers found the clasp on the collar. It was hot to the touch, probably from all that electricity. He pressed the release and the collar fell away, hitting the floor with a heavy clang. The Shalkir's 6 eyes went wide. It touched its own neck with one massive paw, feeling the place where the collar had been. Then it made a sound that broke Doyen's heart. A whimper, high and confused, the sound of something that had forgotten it could exist without pain. "That's right," Doyen whispered. "It's gone. You're okay now." The creature stared at him for a long moment. Then, moving slowly like it didn't quite believe what it was doing, it lowered its enormous head and pressed its nose against Doyen's outstretched palm. The scales were warm and smooth. The creature's breath came in short, quick bursts. And then, as Doyen gently moved his hand to scratch behind what passed for the Shalkir's ears, it made another sound, this one deeper, rumbling, almost like a purr. Tears stung Doyen's eyes. When was the last time this creature had been touched with kindness? Maybe never. The other 2 Shalkir had been watching from across the hall. Now they approached slowly, cautiously. They saw their pack leader standing calm with this strange small being. They saw the collar on the ground. One of them whined softly, a question in the sound. Doyen looked at them and smiled. "Come here. It's all right. I'll help you too." It took a few minutes, but eventually both of them came close enough for Doyen to remove their collars as well. The second one was so relieved it collapsed right there on the floor, legs giving out. The third one pressed against Doyen's side, hard enough to nearly knock him over, desperate for contact after years of isolation. Within minutes, all 3 of these supposedly vicious war beasts were sitting peacefully around one human. The largest one had actually laid down and put its head in Doyen's lap, 6 eyes closed, finally resting. Doyen ran his hands over its scarred scales and felt anger burn in his chest. Someone had done this. Someone had taken these creatures and hurt them over and over until they forgot what safety felt like. Yuna slowly emerged from behind the table, her mouth hanging open. Other aliens began to peek out from doorways and hiding spots. Everyone stared in absolute silence. Ambassador Kaelrin pushed through the crowd, rainbow light flashing angrily across crystalline skin. "What have you done?" The ambassador's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Those are Vryn property. You've contaminated them." "Contaminated?" Doyen looked up, still gently stroking the Shalkir's head. "I took off the collars that were hurting them. I showed them basic kindness. That's not contamination. You don't understand." Kaelrin's form seemed to grow larger, more imposing. "Shalkir are weapons. They are trained through discipline and control. What you've done is biological manipulation. It's forbidden." "They're not weapons," Doyen said quietly. "They're living beings." And they were scared. A new voice spoke from the crowd. It was deep and ancient, like rocks grinding together. "The human speaks truth." An old alien stepped forward, one of the Moranthi, a species so old that most other races considered them legends. Its body looked like weathered stone, and its eyes held the weight of centuries. "I watched everything through the security feeds. The Shalkir were not aggressive. They were in distress." "That's ridiculous," Kaelrin snapped. "Shalkir are bred for combat. They know nothing else." "Actually," a small voice said, and everyone turned. A young Vryn stepped forward, its crystalline body much dimmer than Kaelrin's, marked with the signs of a low-ranking handler. "Actually, Ambassador, that's not entirely true. The Shalkir aren't bred. We take them from their home planet as cubs. We train them with pain because that's how it's always been done." Kaelrin's light flashed dangerously. "Handler Terralix, you forget yourself." But Terralix kept talking, words rushing out like water through a broken dam. "I've worked in the kennels for 6 years. I've seen what happens to them. They don't sleep well. They barely eat. Some of them just stop moving, stop caring if they live or die. I always thought maybe there was another way, but I'm just a handler. Nobody listens to handlers. Yuna stepped up beside Doyen, her diplomat face firmly in place. It seems to me that what Doyen did was save lives. If these Schalker had continued their panic, someone would have been hurt, probably killed. He stopped a disaster using nothing but compassion. He violated Vrin law, Kael'ren's voice boomed through the hall. To touch a Schalker without authorization is a crime punishable by death. I demand this human be arrested immediately. Security guards moved forward, but they looked uncertain. How do you arrest someone for calming down 3 dangerous creatures when everyone else had run away? The ancient Moranthi held up one stone hand. Perhaps we should not be hasty. The human has demonstrated something we have not seen in 10,000 years of coalition history. The old alien looked directly at Doyen with eyes that seemed to see right through him. One species calming another species' war beast through nothing but gentleness and understanding. The Schalkir in Doyen's lap raised its head and made a soft sound, almost protective. The other 2 moved closer to him. Kael'ren pointed one crystalline finger at Doyen. These creatures are valuable assets of the Vrin Empire. They have been trained at great expense. This human has ruined them with his emotional interference. He must face trial. The Moranthi was quiet for a long moment. Then it spoke again, and this time every being in the room leaned in to listen. Very well, there will be a trial. But not just of the human. The ancient alien looked around at all the faces watching. Hundreds of species, thousands of years of civilization between them. We will also put a question to trial. The question is this: what is worth more? The way we have always done things, or the chance to do things better? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Doyen felt the Schalkir press against him, seeking comfort. He looked at Yuna, who gave him a small nod. Whatever happened next, Earth would stand with him. Kael'ren's light pulsed with barely controlled anger. Fine, let there be a trial. But these Schalkir must be secured until then. They are still Vrin property. No, Doyen said firmly. 3 pairs of 6 eyes looked at him with something that might have been trust. If you take them back and put those collars on again, you'll undo everything. They'll be even more traumatized than before. And what do you suggest, human? Kael'ren asked coldly. Doyen took a deep breath. Let me stay with them. I'll keep them calm. They won't hurt anyone. The Moranthi nodded slowly. Agreed. The human will remain with the Schalkir in secure quarters until the trial. We will reconvene in 3 days. As security led them away, Doyen walking calmly with 3 massive creatures following him like faithful dogs. He heard aliens whispering to each other in a dozen languages. He heard words like impossible and dangerous and unprecedented. But he also heard one other word, repeated over and over: compassion. And for the first time since arriving at the station, Doyen felt like maybe Earth had brought something to the galaxy that it truly needed. The secure quarters were actually quite comfortable. A large room with soft lighting, sleeping platforms, and a window that looked out at the stars. The Schalkir had explored every corner, sniffing and investigating, before finally settling down near Doyen. The largest one, Doyen had started thinking of him as leader, refused to be more than a few feet away at all times. Doyen sat on the floor, back against the wall, while Leader rested his massive head across Doyen's legs. The other 2 dozed nearby. It had been hours since the incident in the Grand Hall, and Doyen's mind kept replaying everything that had happened. A soft knock at the door made all 3 Schalkir raise their heads. Doyen gently moved Leader aside and stood up. Who is it? It's me, Yuna called through the door. Can I come in? Yes, but move slowly. They're still nervous around new people. The door slid open and Yuna stepped inside, carrying a bag. She froze when 3 pairs of 6 eyes locked onto her. Oh, they're much bigger up close. They won't hurt you, Doyen said. Come sit. What did you bring? Yuna carefully made her way across the room and sat beside Doyen, keeping her movements smooth and calm like he'd taught her. Food for you. And I thought. She reached into the bag and pulled out 3 large pieces of meat. I thought they might be hungry. Leader's ears perked up immediately. His nose twitched. Good thinking, Doyen said. He took the meat and held it out on his flat palm. Here, leader. It's okay. The Shalkir took the meat gently, carefully avoiding Doyen's fingers with those massive teeth. Then he did something unexpected. He took the food to the other two and waited until they'd eaten before having any himself. He's sharing, Una breathed. That's pack behavior, social behavior. Exactly, Doyen watched with a sad smile. The Vryn have been treating them like solitary weapons, but they're social creatures. They need each other. They need family. Una was quiet for a moment. Doyen, the trial is in 2 days. The Coalition Council has been arguing non-stop. Some species think what you did was incredible. Others think you committed a serious crime. And the Vryn, she shook her head. The Vryn are furious. Do you know what you've done to their empire? I freed 3 animals from shock collars. You've threatened their entire security system, Una said. The Vryn use Shalkir across 200 worlds. If word gets out that these creatures can be calmed with kindness instead of controlled with pain, it undermines everything. Their guards, their military structure, their authority, all of it depends on the Shalkir being seen as unstoppable weapons. Doyen felt anger rise in his chest again. So they'd rather keep torturing them than admit there's a better way? I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's going to be a fight. Una pulled out a small device from her bag. But you're not alone. Look at this. She activated the device and a holographic screen appeared in the air. It showed news broadcasts from across the galaxy. Every major network was covering the story. Doyen saw footage of himself kneeling before the Shalkir, replayed over and over. He saw panels of experts arguing. He saw protesters gathering on different worlds, some supporting him, some demanding his arrest. One broadcast caught his attention. It was an interview with Handler Terrelix, the young Vryn who had spoken up in the Grand Hall. I've wanted to say something for years, Terrelix was telling the interviewer, light pulsing nervously through crystalline skin. The way we treat Shalkir is wrong. They suffer. Anyone who works with them can see it. But speaking against tradition means losing everything. Your job, your status, maybe even your life. This human, this Doyen, he wasn't afraid to show compassion even when it might cost him. That's what courage really looks like. The broadcast switched to show other handlers coming forward, one after another, speaking quietly about the things they'd witnessed in the kennels. The crying of cubs taken from their mothers. The blank, empty looks in the eyes of Shalkir who had given up hope. The ones who had died not from injury, but from what looked like broken hearts. You've started something, Una said softly. People are questioning things they never questioned before. Before Doyen could respond, the door opened again. This time it was the ancient Moranthi, moving slowly into the room. The Shalkir immediately went on alert, but they didn't growl. Something about the old being seemed to calm them. I am called Teshava, the Moranthi said in that deep, grinding voice. I have observed your species since you first looked up at the stars. Human. I have watched you make terrible mistakes and beautiful progress. Today, I watched you do something that surprised me. And I have not been surprised in 3,000 years. Doyen bowed his head respectfully. Thank you for speaking at the trial. I did not speak for you, Teshava corrected gently. I spoke for truth. But I came here to warn you. The trial will not be easy. Ambassador Kael'ren has powerful allies. They will argue that what you did was dangerous, that emotion makes humans unstable, that your kind cannot be trusted with membership in the Coalition. What can I do? The ancient alien moved closer and placed one stone hand on the head of leader. The Shalkir closed all 6 eyes and leaned into the touch. You can tell them the truth. Not complicated truth. Not diplomatic truth. Simple truth. Why did you approach this creature when everyone else ran? Doyen looked at Leader, at the scars across his scales, at the way he still flinched sometimes at sudden movements. Because he needed someone to stay. Because I've spent my whole life with creatures that everyone else gave up on, and I learned that there's no such thing as a lost cause. There's just people who stop trying too soon. Teshava made a sound that might have been approval. Remember those words? You will need them soon. The ancient being turned to leave but paused at the door. One more thing. The Vryn have made a proposal. If you lose the trial, you will be executed for violating their laws. But if you win, they want a chance to prove your method is false. They want to take you to Vryn Prime, to the Black Kennels where they keep their most violent Shalkir. They say if you can rehabilitate even a few of those creatures, they will accept that your way has merit. Yuna stood up quickly. That's insane. Those kennels are death traps. I've read about them. The Shalkir there have been abused for decades. They're beyond help. Maybe, Teshava said. Or maybe they just need someone willing to try. The ancient alien looked directly at Doyen. Do you accept these terms? Every logical part of Doyen's brain screamed no. But he looked at Leader, who had opened his eyes and was watching Doyen with something that looked like hope. He thought about all the other Shalkir across the galaxy, living in pain, believing that pain was all there was. I accept, Doyen said. Yuna grabbed his arm. Doyen, you could die. I could die anyway, he pointed out. At least this way, if I succeed, it means something. The trial began the next morning. The Coalition Council chamber was a massive circular room with seats rising up in tiers. Representatives from all 47 member species sat in their designated areas. And now, for the first time, humans had a seat too, though that seat might not last past today. Doyen stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small. The 3 Shalkir had been allowed to attend and were chained at the back of the room. Though Doyen had insisted the chains be loose and comfortable, all 3 kept their eyes fixed on him. Ambassador Kael'ren spoke first, light flashing dramatically through crystalline form. This human stands accused of biological manipulation and violation of Vryn law. He touched sacred war beasts without permission. He removed their control collars. He deliberately interfered with Vryn security during an official coalition function. For these crimes, we demand justice. A representative from the insect-like species stood up. But didn't the humans' actions prevent casualties? The Shalkir were out of control. People could have died. They were only out of control because their collars malfunctioned, Kael'ren argued. A technical problem that would have been resolved. Instead, this human took advantage of the situation to push his emotional agenda. Emotional agenda? Yuna stood from the human section, her voice sharp. Is that what we're calling compassion now? The chamber erupted into argument. Some species defended Doyen. Others agreed with the Vryn. The noise grew louder and louder until Teshava raised one stone hand. Silence. The ancient voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Let the humans speak. Doyen of Earth, tell us. Why did you do what you did? Doyen took a deep breath. He thought about his mother teaching him to sit quietly with a frightened dog until it learned to trust again. He thought about every animal he'd ever helped, every creature that others had called hopeless. I did it because nobody else would, he said simply. I looked at those Shalkir and I didn't see weapons or tools or property. I saw living beings in pain. And yes, I'm human. And yes, we feel things strongly. But is that really a weakness? He looked around at all the alien faces watching him. You've built this amazing civilization. You travel between stars. You've solved problems that seem impossible. But somewhere along the way, some of you forgot that strength isn't just about power and control. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is be gentle. The chamber was completely silent now. The Shalkir weren't attacking because they were evil or vicious, Doyen continued. They were attacking because they were scared and hurt and had never known anything else. I've seen the same thing in dogs, horses, birds, any creature that's been abused. And I've learned that fear and pain don't make loyalty. They make desperation. But kindness, trust, those things make real bonds. Unbreakable bonds. He pointed to the back of the room where Leader was watching him. That Shalkir could kill me in seconds. But he won't. Not because he's afraid of punishment, but because I showed him something different. I showed him safety. And now he trusts me more than any collar or shock or threat could ever force him to. Ambassador Kael'ren's light pulsed angrily. Pretty words. But words mean nothing. The human claims his way is better? Then let him prove it. Let him go to the Black Kennels and try his kindness on the most dangerous Shalkir in the Empire. When he fails, or dies, we will see the truth. Teshava looked at Doyen. Do you still accept these terms? Doyen glanced at Yuna, who looked terrified. He looked at the three Shalkir, who had risen to their feet, sensing his distress. And he thought about all the others suffering in those kennels, waiting for someone to care. I accept, he said firmly. I'll go to your black kennels, and I'll show you that there is no such thing as a creature too broken to heal. The ship that took them to Vryn Prime was cold and efficient, just like everything else the Vryn Empire built. Doyen stood at the viewing window, watching the planet grow larger as they approached. It was beautiful, purple and silver clouds swirling over continents that sparkled like gems. But beauty could hide terrible things. You don't have to do this, Yuna said from behind him. She'd insisted on coming, and the council had agreed to let one more human accompany Doyen. She'd also brought Jiwan, a trauma psychologist who worked with survivors of abuse back on Earth. If anyone could help Doyen deal with what they were about to see, it was Jiwan. Yes, I do, Doyen said quietly. He pressed his hand against the cold glass. If I back out now, nothing changes. The Vryn keep using shock collars, the Shalkir keep suffering, and Earth gets labeled as too emotional and unstable for the Coalition. Jiwan came to stand beside them. She was older than both Doyen and Yuna, with gray streaks in her hair and eyes that had seen too much pain. I've read the reports on the Black Kennels, she said. 5,000 Shalkir. Most of them have been there for over 20 years. The ones who were too aggressive for normal duty. The ones who fought back too hard or stopped obeying commands. They're kept in isolation, no pack contact, no sunlight, minimal food. She paused. Doyen, these aren't like the three you helped on the station. Those three still had some hope left. These have been completely broken. Then they need help even more, Doyen said simply. The ship landed at a military facility on the dark side of the planet. Armed Vryn guards met them at the entrance, their crystalline bodies pulsing with harsh red light. No one spoke as they led the humans through corridors that went down, down, down into the earth. The smell hit Doyen first. Waste and fear and something else, the scent of suffering. His stomach turned. They reached a massive door made of some black metal that seemed to absorb light. The head guard, a Vryn whose crystalline form was covered in military markings, turned to face them. Beyond this door are the most dangerous creatures in the Empire. We've had handlers killed. We've had entire teams injured. These are not pets, human. These are monsters we keep locked away because they cannot be controlled. They're not monsters, Doyen said. They're victims. The guard's light flashed with something that might have been discussed. You have 30 days. If you can rehabilitate 10% of the population, that's 500 Shalkir, we will consider your methods valid. If you fail, or if you're killed, your species will be removed from the Coalition and forbidden from returning. And if he succeeds, Yuna asked sharply, then we will review our protocols, the guard said, though his tone suggested he thought success was impossible. The doors opened with a groan of metal. The sound that came from within made Doyen's blood run cold. It was the sound of thousands of voices, howling, screaming, crying. It was the sound of absolute despair given form. They stepped inside. The black kennels were worse than Doyen had imagined. Rows upon rows of small cages stretched in every direction, stacked 3 high, going on for what looked like miles. In each cage was a Shalkir, and every single one bore scars. Missing eyes, broken claws, patches of scales torn away. And the eyes, those 6 eyes per creature that should have gleamed with intelligence, were dull and empty. Jiwan put a hand over her mouth. Even Yuna, trained to keep her diplomatic composure in any situation, looked horrified. Where do we start? Doyen asked, though his voice shook. A younger handler, not Terralix, but someone who looked equally uncomfortable, gestured to the furthest row. That section contains the worst cases, the ones we've marked as untrainable. If you're going to try your human methods, you might as well start there. Doyen walked slowly down the row, looking into each cage. The Shalkir inside either cowered in the back corners or threw themselves at the bars with mindless rage. Both reactions came from the same place: total loss of hope. Then, he saw her. She was in the last cage on the left, curled in a tight ball in the corner. She was missing her left eye, and her scales were covered in old scars. Her tag read, Unit 47, Untrainable, Isolation Protocol. What happened to her? Doyen asked. The handler checked his datapad. Taken from her home world as a cub 15 years ago, resisted training, injured 3 handlers, placed in isolation for 13 years. She hasn't responded to commands in over a decade. She doesn't eat unless forced. We keep her alive only because disposal would require paperwork. Doyen felt something break inside his chest. 13 years alone. 13 years of darkness and silence and pain. I want to work with her, he said. The handler looked surprised. Unit 47? She's practically dead already. Why waste time on... Her name isn't Unit 47, Doyen interrupted. He looked at the broken creature in the cage and made a decision. Her name is Nari, and she's going to be the first one I help. Over the next several days, Doyen established a routine. Every morning, he would arrive at Nari's cage and simply sit outside it. He wouldn't try to touch her, wouldn't give commands, would just sit and talk in a soft voice. He told her about Earth, about the rehabilitation center where he grew up, about his mother who taught him that every living thing deserves kindness, about the stars outside and the worlds she might see someday if she could just hold on a little longer. Nari never moved, never responded, just stayed curled in her corner like she was trying to disappear. Jiwan worked with Doyen every evening, helping him process what he was seeing. You can't save all of them, she said gently on the 4th night. They were in their quarters, and Doyen had barely touched his food. There are 5,000 Shalkir here. You have 30 days. The math doesn't work. I know, Doyen whispered. But even if I can only help a few, isn't that better than helping none? Yuna spent her time documenting everything. She recorded video, took notes, interviewed handlers who were willing to talk. She was building a case, evidence that could be presented to the coalition, but even she looked tired and sad. Some of the handlers are on our side, she told Doyen on the 6th day. They've been sending messages to Terralix. There's a movement starting, Vrin, who want reform, but it's slow, and we're running out of time. On the 7th day, something changed. Doyen was sitting outside Nari's cage, talking about nothing in particular, when he noticed that her single remaining eye was open. She was watching him. His heart jumped, but he forced himself to stay calm. Hey there, Nari, he said softly. I see you. I'm glad you're awake. Slowly, over the course of an hour, Nari uncurled from her ball. She didn't come closer, but she sat up and kept watching him. That's good, Doyen encouraged. You're doing so good. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here. By the end of the day, Nari had moved from the back corner to the middle of her cage. Still far from the bars, but closer. It was progress. Tiny, fragile progress. Word began to spread through the kennels. The human was doing something strange. He wasn't using shock sticks or commands. He was just sitting and talking, and some of the Shalkir were starting to listen. On the 10th day, Nari approached the bars. Doyen held his breath as she sniffed the air near his hand. She didn't touch him, but she was close. So close. You're so brave, Doyen whispered. You're the bravest one here. On the 15th day, Nari pressed her nose against the bars. Doyen carefully, slowly, reached through and touched her scarred muzzle. She flinched but didn't pull away. And then she made a sound. A soft whimper that held 15 years of pain and loneliness. Doyen cried. He couldn't help it. He pressed his forehead against the bars and let the tears fall. I'm so sorry, he told her. I'm so sorry for what they did to you. But you're going to be okay now, I promise. After that, progress came faster. Nari began eating regularly. She responded when Doyen spoke to her. And slowly, carefully, he began teaching her that touch could mean safety instead of pain. Other Shalkir were watching. Doyen would walk through the kennels, and creatures that had been cowering or raging would pause. They were curious about this human who spoke softly and never hurt anyone. By the 20th day, Doyen was working with 12 different Shalkir. It wasn't many compared to 5,000, but it was something. Each one responded to gentleness in their own way. Some took days just to make eye contact. Others pressed against the bars immediately, desperate for any kind of positive attention. Jiwon helped where she could, using her training to identify which Shalkir might respond best to intervention. Yuna coordinated with sympathetic handlers to get better food and cleaner conditions for the ones Doyen was working with. On the 25th day, the head guard came to inspect their progress. He walked down the row where Doyen had been working and stopped at Nari's cage. The scarred Shalkir was sitting calmly, her head resting near the bars where Doyen sat. 12, the guard said flatly. You've made progress with 12 out of 5,000. That's not even 1%, you need 500. I know the numbers, Doyen said. But look at her, really look. This Shalkir was marked as untrainable. You were going to dispose of her. And now she's eating, sleeping, engaging? That matters. It's not enough, the guard said. But something in his crystalline form seemed less certain than before. That night, Doyen lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. 25 days in, and he'd helped 12 Shalkir. Even if he worked twice as fast, he'd never reach 500. The math was impossible. But then he thought about Nari, about how her eye had brightened, about how she'd started making soft sounds when she saw him, almost like greeting a friend. Even if he failed the challenge, even if Earth got expelled from the coalition, at least 12 Shalkir knew that someone cared. At least 12 creatures had been shown that the universe wasn't all pain. Maybe that had to be enough. On the morning of the 26th day, Doyen arrived at the kennels to find chaos. Alarms were blaring, handlers were running everywhere. And the head guard was waiting at the entrance, red light pulsing frantically through his crystalline body. What did you do? The guard demanded. What? Nothing. I just got here. Someone sabotaged the locking system. All the cages are opening. All 5,000 Shalkir are about to be released into the facility. The guard's form blazed with rage. Did you really think this would work? That releasing these monsters would prove your point? I didn't do this, Doyen shouted. But even as he said it, he heard the sound of thousands of locks clicking open. And then the screaming started. The sound was like nothing Doyen had ever heard. 5,000 voices, howling, roaring, screaming, all at once. The walls shook with it. The floor vibrated. And through it all came the sound of doors crashing open and claws scraping against metal. Get to the control room, the head guard shouted at his handlers. Seal the emergency doors. Don't let them reach the upper levels. Handlers scattered in every direction. Some ran for weapons. Others just ran, pure fear driving them. The red emergency lights made everything look like it was covered in blood. Doyen stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. Then he thought of Yuna and Jiwon. They were deeper in the facility, in the observation area where they'd been reviewing footage. I have to find my people, Doyen shouted to the guard, but the Vryn was already gone, fleeing toward the exit. Doyen ran into the kennels. The scene was chaos. Shalkir poured out of their cages like water from a broken dam. Some ran wildly in circles, disoriented by sudden freedom. Others attacked anything that moved: walls, equipment, each other. Years of abuse and isolation had destroyed their ability to think clearly. They were pure pain given form. Yuna! Jiwon! Doyen screamed, but his voice was lost in the noise. He pushed through the chaos, dodging between massive bodies. A Shalkir lunged at him and he rolled aside. Another one's claws whistled past his head. He kept moving, kept searching. Finally, he saw them. Yuna and Jiwon had barricaded themselves in a small control room, visible through a window. They were trying to seal the door, but Shalkir were throwing themselves against it. The door wouldn't hold much longer. Doyen ran toward them, but he didn't make it. A group of Shalkir cut off his path, circling him, driving him backward. He found himself in the central yard of the facility, a large open space where handlers used to conduct training. Now it was filling with Shalkir, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all confused and angry and terrified. He was trapped in the center of them all. This was it. This was how he died, torn apart by the very creatures he'd been trying to save. Part of him wanted to laugh at the irony. Part of him wanted to cry. But mostly, he just felt sad for them. These poor, broken beings who had suffered so much that they couldn't even recognize someone trying to help. The Shalkir moved closer, a tightening circle of teeth and claws and six-eyed stares. Doyen could run, but where would he go? He was surrounded. Fighting was pointless. He couldn't hurt them even if he wanted to, and he definitely didn't want to. So he did the only thing he could think of. The thing his mother had taught him when he was very young and a scared dog had cornered him in a barn. He sat down. Right there in the middle of the yard, with hundreds of dangerous creatures circling him, Doyen crossed his legs and sat on the cold floor. He made himself small, non-threatening. He took a deep breath and started to sing. It was an old song his mother used to sing when she worked with the most frightened animals. A Korean lullaby about the moon watching over all living things. His voice shook at first, but he kept going, letting the melody fill the space between heartbeats. The nearest Shalkir paused, head tilted in confusion. Others slowed their advance. They'd never heard anything like this before. In their entire lives, humans had only ever shouted commands or screamed in fear. But this human was sitting calmly and making soft, strange sounds. Doyen kept singing, tears running down his face. If these were his last moments, at least he'd spend them trying to bring some peace to this terrible place. A sound from the edge of the crowd made him open his eyes. A single Shalkir was pushing through the mass of bodies, limping badly, missing one eye. Nari? She made her way to Doyen's side and positioned herself between him and the aggressive pack. Her lips pulled back in a warning snarl, but not at Doyen, at the others. She was protecting him. More movement in the crowd. 3 larger Shalkir appeared. The ones from the station, the ones Doyen had first helped. They'd escaped their handlers and tracked him here, following his scent across the facility. They took up positions around him, forming a protective ring. One by one, the other Shalkir that Doyen had worked with over the past weeks pushed through the crowd. All 12 of them. They stood with Nari and the 3 from the station, creating a barrier of scaled bodies around the small human who had shown them kindness. The aggressive Shalkir stopped advancing. They looked at their packmates with confusion. Why were these ones protecting the human? What did they know that the others didn't? Doyen kept singing, his voice stronger now. And slowly, the Shalkir protecting him began to make sounds too. Not aggressive growls, but something else. Something softer. They were humming, in their own way, joining his song. The sound rippled through the crowd. More Shalkir stopped their rampage. Some sat down, exhausted from their burst of violent energy. Others just watched, trying to understand what was happening. The standoff lasted for hours. The Shalkir around Doyen never moved, never wavered in their protection. And the thousands of others, robbed of their target, gradually calmed. Some wandered away to explore the facility. Others simply lay down where they were, overwhelmed by everything. Eventually, Doyen's voice gave out. He stopped singing and just sat there, one hand resting on Nari's scarred head. She leaned against him, a low, rumbling purr coming from deep in her chest. The sound of heavy boots announced the arrival of coalition security forces. They'd finally fought through the chaos to reach the central yard. What they found made them stop in their tracks. Thousands of Shalkir lay peacefully in the yard, and in the center of them all sat one human, surrounded by a protective circle of creatures sleeping against their scaled bodies. Commander Tesheva was with them, the ancient Maranthi's stone form moving slowly through the crowd of Shalkir. None of them challenged the old being. Some even moved aside respectfully. "He's alive," Tesheva said, and there was something like wonder in that ancient voice. Against all logic, against all probability, the human is alive and unharmed. Yuna and Jiwon ran from the control room the moment it was safe. They found Doyen still sitting with Nari, too exhausted to move. Yuna dropped to her knees beside him. "You idiot," she said, hugging him tight. "You beautiful, crazy idiot. We thought you were dead." "Who sabotaged the locks?" Doyen asked weakly. "The head guard," Tesheva answered. "He thought that releasing all the Shalkir would prove humans were too emotional and foolish. He expected you to be killed. He expected chaos to reign. Instead..." The ancient being gestured at the peaceful yard. Instead, you proved something far more important. More Vryn were arriving now, including Ambassador Kaelrin. The ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with complicated emotions, anger, confusion, and something that might have been shame. "This is impossible," Kaelrin said. 5,000 Shalkir, all released at once. There should be bodies everywhere. There should be carnage. "There would have been," Teshava said, "if any other species had been here. But this human did what your people have never done. He gave them a choice, fight or trust. And enough of them chose trust to stop the others from violence." Doyen slowly got to his feet, leaning heavily on Yuna for support. Nari stood with him, refusing to leave his side. The other Shalkir who had protected him stayed close too. "I didn't save 500, Doyen said, looking at Ambassador Kaelrin. "I failed your test, but I saved 15. And those 15 saved me. And maybe that's the point you've been missing all along. You can't force loyalty with pain. You can only inspire it with love." Handler Terralix pushed through the crowd of Vryn. "Ambassador, I have something to confess. I've been in contact with other handlers across the Empire. There are thousands of us who want change. We've been documenting the abuses, recording the suffering, and now the whole galaxy is watching. They've seen what happened here. They've seen the Shalkir choosing to protect instead of attack. You can't hide the truth anymore." Kelrin's light pulsed weakly. For the first time, the proud ambassador looked small. "What do you want?" "Freedom for the Shalkir," Doyen said firmly. "All of them. Return them to their homeworld. Let them live as they were meant to live, as families, as packs, as free beings, and end the practice of taking cubs for training, forever." "The Empire will never agree to—" "The Empire will agree," Teshava interrupted, "or the Empire will face sanctions from the entire coalition. I have already begun the proceedings." The ancient being looked around at all the Shalkir, at their scars and broken bodies and eyes that were just beginning to hold hope again. 10,000 years I have watched species rise and fall. Some gained power through strength, some through intelligence. But I have learned that the civilizations that endure are the ones that choose compassion over cruelty. The Vryn Empire can evolve, or it can fade into history. The choice is yours. The following weeks were a blur. The Coalition held emergency sessions. Evidence presented by Yuna and collected by sympathetic handlers was aired across every news network in the galaxy. Public opinion turned sharply against the Vryn, and even many Vryn citizens demanded change. In the end, a treaty was signed. The Shalkir breeding and training program was officially ended. All Shalkir across the Empire were to be returned to their homeworld, a planet called Shaltar that the Vryn had been strip mining for resources while stealing its apex predators. Earth was granted full Coalition membership with a special honor, Guardians of the Voiceless. A new branch of the Coalition was created, the Galactic Animal Welfare Council, with Doyen chosen to lead it. Thousands of Shalkir were transported home over the following months. Some would take years to recover from their trauma. Some might never fully heal. But they would have the chance to try, surrounded by others of their kind, under open skies, free from shock collars and cages. Doyen went with the first transport to Shaltar. He wanted to see them home safely, wanted to make sure the planet was being restored properly, wanted to help however he could. Nari refused to leave his side. Even when offered the chance to stay with her own kind, she chose to remain near the human who had first shown her kindness. She became something unprecedented, an ambassador between species, proof that trust could cross the boundaries of biology and culture. On his last day on Shaltar, Doyen stood on a hill watching Shalkir cubs play in the valley below. They'd never known cages, never known collars. They played and tumbled and explored the way young things were meant to, with joy and curiosity and no fear at all. Yuna found him there, Nari lying peacefully at his feet. "You know they're making documentaries about you, right? Calling you the human who changed the galaxy with a whisper?" Doyen smiled but shook his head. "I didn't change anything, I just showed people what was already there. The capacity for healing, for forgiveness, for choosing something better than violence. You make it sound easy, Yuna said. It's not easy, Doyun admitted. It's the hardest thing in the world to look at something that scares you and choose compassion instead of control. But it's worth it. Every time. They stood in silence for a while, watching the cubs play. Then Yuna asked, "What's next for you?" "There are other species," Doyen said quietly. "Other creatures being used and abused across the galaxy. The Welfare Council has received thousands of reports already. So I guess I keep going. Keep trying to show people that there's a better way." "That's a big job," Yuna said. "Changing an entire galaxy's mindset." Doyen reached down to scratch behind Nari's ears, and she rumbled contentedly. "You don't change it all at once. You change it one heart at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one scared creature at a time." He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in Shaltar's evening sky. "My mother taught me that every life matters. Every being deserves someone who will stay when things get hard. And if humans can be that for the galaxy, the ones who stay, the ones who care, then maybe that's our purpose out here among the stars." Nari stood and pressed her head against his hand, her single eye closing in contentment. Around them, the sounds of happy Shalkir cubs filled the air. And in the distance, other species across the galaxy were beginning to ask questions they'd never asked before. What else have we been doing wrong? What other cruelties have we accepted as normal? What else could we change if we just had the courage to try? One human had shown them that strength wasn't about domination or control. True strength was having the power to hurt and choosing not to. True strength was looking at a dangerous creature and seeing not a weapon, but a soul. And if one human could do that, what else might humanity bring to this vast and ancient galaxy? Doyen smiled and looked up at the stars. Out there, billions of beings were living their lives, some in pain, some in fear, some who had forgotten what kindness felt like. But now they knew that somewhere in the galaxy, there were humans. And humans cared. It was a start.